Hey Amanda, this is Justin, the women's coach at Rutgers.
Hi, Justin.
So I would just say the thing it feels like for me, and I don't know if it's the same on the men's side. Obviously, there's a lot more history, and it's sort of ironic. Like we have the oldest intercollegiate sport, but I think that one of the biggest challenges, just in general, is visibility of the sport, legitimizing our sport in our athletic departments. I think that even like whether it's track and field, swimming, I think that in a lot of ways we're behind those sports, it feels like to me, in a lot of ways. And I mean, certainly on the women's side, I can speak, we've got a lot of programs that are like less than 30 years old, so it's sort of obvious why on the
Mhm.
collegiate side. But I think just in terms of trying to strengthen our position within our athletic departments and just the sport as a whole, so whether it's the national team level, high school, obviously the sport is growing tremendously. It's awesome, we want to keep that going. But um that would be sort of my perspective, like being within our department, and then just other departments I've been in collegiately, is how do we continue to legitimize our sport and put ourselves on par, if not above, whether it's the swimmings of the world or the track and field, soccer, softball, women's volleyball, those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think Justin, there's anything specific we at US Rowing could do to message that or elevate the sport in the minds of these administrators and athletic directors? I don't know, do you have
Yeah,
any
well,
specific?
yeah, well, in the CRCA, the Collegiate Rowing Coaches Association, we've been talking quite a bit about how do we integrate all levels of the sport. Looking to like the ITA and the Tennis Association, and swimming, volleyball seems to have a pretty robust organization from juniors all the way to the national team. Integrating the collegiate coaches, the collegiate athletes, and that membership seems to us, and some of the research we've done, to be a lot more integrated and robust across all levels, whereas
Hmm.
we're a little more siloed, whether it's the junior level, US rowing, the collegiate, even, like the men's collegiate coaches, the women's collegiate coaches, like, there seems to be some progress and some growth there. But it
Yeah.
seems to me like other sports, not just collegiately, but across all levels, are doing a better job of integrating
Huh.
throughout the level. Like a volleyball, to me, the AVCA, or tennis and the ITA, they seem to be a little more integrated.
That's interesting. Yeah, yeah. I could see what you're saying in terms of silos there. I wonder, would it ever be helpful to hold? Would they show up if we held um, a Zoom or some sort of coming together of for administrators hosted by US Rowing to talk about sort of the value of the sport for their student athletes? Like, what would speak to them, if anything, coming from us?
Yeah, I think, I mean, these are just my thoughts, but and I think some thoughts of others, in the CRCA. But I think that really it's not about education. It's more like packing a punch and having a presence. I think that
Mhm.
really would be my thoughts on the more, the greater the membership, the greater, like, the, like, how do we get everybody involved at all levels? Like, how do we have a coaches conference, or from all levels, where that's
Right.
like, that's
Right.
more robust. That's more like everybody's there. Or, I mean, it doesn't need to be a coaches conference, but those kinds of things where everybody, um, where we need a movement, right? Like, we've got programs on the men's side, the women's side getting cut right now. How do we fight that, right? How do we get everybody in the sport on the same page, like right now,
Right.
and
Right.
like creating movements and creating energy? So to me, it's I would say it's less about educating administrators on the value of the sport, and more just having a presence in any way and every way that we can. Um, the more the better. So I
Yeah.
don't, that's not
Yeah.
too specific, obviously, but I just think the more we can all work together, the better.
Yeah, no, I think that that makes sense, and sort of a bigger tent too. That's what I'm hearing in these different conversations for sure.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think so. Some of the
Amanda.
things that we've talked about is how do we, just have, I think that we've made a lot of great progress. I think Brett's done a tremendous job in terms of the outreach, and that connection between, like, the CRCA in particular, and US rowing, and how do we further expand that and develop that and keep that moving in that direction? I think that would only help.
Yeah, and Eric, I'm gonna let you speak. Just to also put out there, this is not meant to be a one and done conversation. I would love to really make sure that it's the beginning of an ongoing conversation with you all. I mean, you're a very, very key group of stakeholders in my mind for this sport. And so I would like to, as a group, keep the conversation going, and with you as individuals, and see, continue to think about what we can do to help collegiate rowing in this country. It's really important. But Eric.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of hop on what Justin said, and also why I was interested in attending tonight. Didn't think of leading off with this, but my program is in a unique one in that we were cut starting at the end of this year, and a big part of it, as I've learned from our administrators and my athletic director, is the lack of presence of rowing at the NCAA level, and like he said, lack of packing a punch. When this was described to me in this way, when a school is considering cutting a sport, they reach out to the NCAA offices in Indianapolis and say, hey, we're considering doing this. What is the background? What is the relationship that the NCAA has with this sport? Is there any information, historical information you can give us? And the NCAA will get back to them and say, oh, well, we have a very strong relationship with women's gymnastics. They spend X amount of money a year lobbying with us. Or they come back and say, you should never cut women's tennis because women's tennis has never been effectively cut without litigation.
Wow. That's interesting. I was wondering how they made those decisions, and I'm sorry to hear that about your team.
Yeah. So when our AD reached out, the answer that she got was that men's rowing in particular, women's rowing at NCAA sport is different. Men's rowing in particular did not have a relationship with the home office in Indianapolis. And so they basically told her, do what you need to do. Like we don't have any historical information for you. And I think that was that's eye-opening for me to hear. I obviously immediately called Chris Chase, but any amount of things we could do in terms of giving you an action item and not a problem. Any amount of things we could do to build our presence, even just at that level, at the administrator level, above the schools with the NCAA, and helping educate them on the value of our sport and what we're doing, I think could go a really long way. I do believe the lack of a lobbying effort at that level in Indianapolis had a major effect on what happened to Stanford and ourselves and Dartmouth Lightweights. So that would be great if we could start working in that direction.
Right. That's helpful to hear.
And thank you for doing this. So
no, it's my pleasure. It's really good to hear from you all. Maddie.
Hi, Amanda. Good to see you.
Hi. Good to see you. I haven't seen you.
I know. Since we raced.
Yeah.
So I just think to put together some of what everybody was just talking about, like as Justin said, there's been a lot of conversation at the CRCA about how we as a coaches group can be better and more all-encompassing. And a lot of that has to do with having a bigger tent and including more programs, potentially juniors, and we're collaborating with the men's coaching association as well, and just trying to make it more inclusive and more beneficial for the coaches. But also a lot of this is, like you said, Eric, it's not yet painful enough for athletic departments to cut rowing programs, because there are other sports out there that are better organized and have more money to litigate, and they have a stronger alumni presence and all this kind of stuff. And so why we're seeing is that it apparently is sort of easy to sweep away the rowing teams, and what we have to figure out is how can we make it more painful. so that these athletic departments are less likely to do that. And some of it is, how do you react when programs are cut or at threat of being cut? But some of it is, what can we proactively put in place to prove that we are strong, right? And that would be stronger collaboration with the national governing body. It would be a stronger educational program that we've already been talking about. It would be stronger alumni presence, not just within your own team and university, but rowing alums.
Uh-oh. Did you freeze? Did she freeze? I thought that was a long thought.
And, I think there's a lot of ways you can do it proactive. Oh, did I get cut out?
You froze, but you're back. You're back.
And I think like having the recruiting database, like you and Paul talked about, like it's more that we can do to show that rowing as a sport, as an entity, is organized and proactive, and strong, right? The better position we're all in within our own athletic departments and as a sport. But we need to do it together and with US Rowing's help to make it really impactful.
Yeah, what can we do? What can we do to help with that?
That's a whole big other conversation. But I mean, I think having streamlined education, right? And I think that already Brett's done a ton with this, with the coaching certification, and all of US Rowing's done a ton with this. But I think the more that we can have, like, we don't have really, there is no requirement to be certified to coach rowing to get hired to coach collegiately, right? And that's we've got to be one of the few sports that you don't really have to have that certification to be hired collegiately. I don't know how US Rowing changes that, right? That's like an institutional decision. But I think things like that sort of point towards seeming less legitimate in the eyes of athletic departments.
I wonder if it would be helpful for us, would this be a good thing or a bad thing? So good, we're talking about this too. If US Rowing were to approach athletic departments and introduce ourselves and say we're rolling out sorry, Brett, like a specialized coaching education component for collegiate coaches, just to more legitimize it in their minds. Plus, couldn't hurt. If that would be, if that could be helpful or not. I'm just sort of thinking out loud.
Amanda, I think it might be good to work with the like the ICRA and the CRCA on that.
Okay.
I think both those coaches groups could, if they were partnering with US Rowing, could support the idea of, look, in our sport, if we're going to make it more legitimate, we really need to go to our athletic departments and say these are the things that someone should do before they get hired. It can all be done, I think, in a way of a conversation together with those groups. Yeah.
Well, all this to say, I think we should have that conversation, because I'm eager for us to come away. It doesn't have to happen tonight, but come away with, concrete things we can do to be supportive of collegiate rowing. So it's not my place to tell you what that is. I'm happy to keep thinking about it, but a million times more than I do about your world. So if you think of something now or in a month or in a year, let's talk about it and see what we can do. Because, if we sort of play the long game, like it's important to US Rowing that the collegiate programs are successful. They are the future national team athletes. And even though most of them aren't, it's still important that there's success in the sport and growth, and access. So, this is important.
Amanda, can I say something?
Yes.
I know I said I was going to be quiet.
No,
really
good.
For those on the call that know me know that's hard. One thing that is happening right now, and I think some of you are aware of it, there was a press release that went out, is that there's currently a US OPC think tank that is specifically addressing this issue of sports being cut, because even though yes, it's happening to rowing, it is happening. We've seen it with swimming and diving even, and we've seen it's happening in other sports as well. And I do represent US Rowing on that think tank, where we're divided into 3 different subgroups of how do we make, especially the non-revenue sports, more relevant, and how do we make sports like ours more relevant, and how do we partner, whether it's partnering with other sports in similar situations. And I'm on the events side of it, What events can we be holding through US Rowing and the USOPC to make our sport more relevant? Can we be partnering with other teams within our athletic departments, but also within our regions to be holding sort of Olympic festivals to drive up youth interests? And again, just make it more apparent. One of the big things we talked about in the first meeting was, we've got Big Ten Network and ACC Network and SEC Network. Like, why don't we have an Olympic network that's just for college, for highlighting those your competitions? And obviously I don't think that we could create enough content, and US Rowing doesn't have the resources to have a US Rowing collegiate channel, but if we partnered with other people, could we get something like that going? Olympic festivals, and we've only had one meeting, we have 2 more before the end of the year, but it's got some heavy hitters on it. The AD at Alabama is the chair, AD at Ohio State is on, UCLA. We've got, I feel like I'm among giants on the calls, but I am actively trying to represent our sport in that to make sure that we can get everything we can out of it.
You're a giant, Brett.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome, bro. Sorry, I was just going to say that's awesome. And my 2 cents would be, the more we have a seat at the table in every one of those situations, like that's what it's about. Again, just my 2 cents, but I think more than the, like, hey, we got more coaching education or whatever, more here's the things we're going to do before we hire somebody. I think the more we just can have a seat at the table with the big dogs as the oldest intercollegiate sport in America, if we pack that presence, I think that stuff is awesome.
Definitely. What else? Any other ideas of what we can be doing, Maddie?
Yeah, just something I wanted to add on before I forget, that's I think related to all of this, is another thing that US Rowing could help with, that would help rowing's position collegiately, is diversity initiatives and DEI initiatives, because I think it's also easier to cut a sport that is predominantly a white affluent sport than it is, and when a department is looking at the diversity of the athletic department, we're an easier target. And we owe it to the sport to make it more available, but we also need to preserve our teams. And I think the more we can make this a sport that's can be available to a broader population, the better position we're going to be within the department.
Yeah, well, I think you guys know you're preaching to the choir on that one. But that's good. And this was brought up actually by some of your athletes, which is great too. I'm sure it's top of mind for many of them. And we do have a lot of plans already for the DEI work at US Rowing, both internally, and then how we can be, we're going to hire a full-time DEI person for our staff. And, how can we be a resource to junior programs, clubs, collegiate programs, to help them make their programs and their boathouses more diverse and inclusive. So I'm excited to roll that out. But if people have specific asks or, what would be helpful in that realm, please don't be shy about it. Let me know.
I mean, I will say that the idea of your US Rowing app with like all the juniors located in one place and accessible to college coaches from a recruiting perspective would help with DEI initiatives, just in terms of, I'm sure we all have our different recruiting methods, but many of us are used to going to the same coaches, the same clubs, recruiting from the same communities that we've built relationships with. And that is a huge place where a lot of athletes fall through the cracks in my opinion. You have to really search. So I think that would be one of the big advantages of that.
For sure. And I mean, maybe that's something that we could, again, thinking out loud, maybe that's something we can do when we have this person on staff, is that they can actually, help connect you all with, where are the programs that are doing outreach programs. Like we all know, we can all name a couple, but there are others that I don't even know about, that, so we could say, here's the list of where that work is happening on the junior level. So then you can reach out to them directly. Like we can do the legwork and then just share it.
I mean, if I can jump in, and just a thought on that recruiting piece, that I think it's a mistake for US Rowing to endorse a commercial recruiting service as they do now with Captain U.
Oh, wait, sorry. I'm getting emails and I didn't hear you. Sorry, Bill. What did you say? A mistake to endorse whom?
I think it's a mistake for U.S. Rowing to endorse a commercial recruiting service, in this case, Captain U, that requires people to pay money for a service. I think that if we're trying to broaden our pool, putting up a financial barrier or creating the impression that you need to use a service, it's endorsed by U.S. Rowing, this is how you get recruited, this is what you need to do to get the attention of college coaches.
Yeah.
And they have to pay a fee to do that.
Yeah. I don't like that either. I didn't know that we were doing that. I didn't know that we were endorsing them. Are they a spot, Brett, do you know about this? Are they a sponsor? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm not a fan of those groups personally. I'm guessing that they are a sponsor, and but I will definitely look into that one.
Ironically, as Bill also knows, right, there's nobody on Captain U, right? It's actually not even really particularly useful because of it. But if I could talk a little, Amanda, I'm John Flynn, I'm at Navy now, but I was in New York long ago.
Yep.
And one thing that came up on the IRCA DEI work, right? So the men's coaches DEI work was this idea that speaks a little bit to what Madeline was saying, which is, we've been talking about how diversity could actually add a lot more value to our teams on campus. And so that is definitely something that, we feel like, US Rowing could be a great partner in that way, and it would be great to pursue that. But in another area of this is, I think it's also important to remember that there's a lot of different types of college rowing out there, right? I know like Greg is here, right? Like there's a very robust club college rowing experience that's out there. There is, Division I and II and III, and men's rowing is very different from women's rowing in each of those divisions. And so, in a lot of ways, we're kind of a many-headed beast, college rowing, which in some ways is good because then, athletes of different ability levels can find a place for themselves. But the fact of the matter is the kid who's putting all of their information into a recruiting service to go to an IRA or Division I, get a full scholarship program on the women's side is very different from a kid who, and you've probably seen this at Row New York, right? Like anybody can row in college, right? Like even people who've never rowed before, and so, but as you look at how, college rowing maybe comes out of its silo and starts to partner, like there probably has to be, some way of appreciating and working with all of those different types of colleges, right? Like the college programs that are very successful at the ACRA, the college programs that are very successful at the Dadvale, the ones that are, going to the IRA or the NCAA, and even within, when I coached at the NCAA level, right? Like there's still 80 some odd Division I programs. Only, well, now 22 of them are going to the NCAAs. There's lots of them that aren't, right? Like more than 2/3. So there's, I think that's, college rowing is not a monolith, in that sense. And so there's going to be different needs, I think, at each of those levels, but then also some commonalities.
Do you think, for sure, and we did talk about that, a lot at Row New York, what's the right fit? But do you think it would be helpful if US Rowing were to host some sort of college fair for high school students? I mean, I know you all have to be careful, right, about contact with students, but where we hosted, for all the young rowers, I mean, that's something I do know a lot about, where they don't know where to begin. And at Row New York, we try to be very helpful with the students, but I know that they would love to be able to hear directly from coaches. Is that a terrible idea? To host, if US Rowing were to host something like, I want to learn about Yale rowing. Well, actually, Laura Simon's going to be, you could go into that breakout Zoom room or whatever it is. Or is that not something that everyone would want to do together?
Amanda, there are some rules really, and we ran into this with all the webinars that Chris Chase did. So it's like, that's okay in a webinar,
Right.
And also, and this is the hard part, and I think I'm going to get some nods on this one, where it differs by conference. Like it's
Right.
all about interpretation
That's one
of
thing.
the rules, and that's what we ran into with the webinars a lot, where we'd have one college coach say
Yeah.
their compliance department said, I can't be on your webinar because
Yeah.
junior athletes could watch it.
Right. Is it just too much trouble?
I'm willing to find a way.
I wanted to, hi Amanda, I'm Sheila.
Hi, Sheila.
I know the college fair being combined with club nationals over the summer, kind of because, it's like everybody's in one place during 1 week. But I think over the years, it's just with the schedule changing, and it went to, the people racing the first 3 days and the second half of the week. And I almost wonder if getting away from that and maybe US Rowing looked at some sort of, regional, I don't know much about college fairs, to be honest, but maybe something regionally. And it's like anybody, any type of school, club, Division 1, 2, men's, and they're just held throughout the country, throughout. Obviously, I'm kind of talking about this in a non-COVID situation.
Yeah, of course, right.
But something maybe not tied to a race, or maybe local races or things like that. Just to provide other opportunities, because I do think there's a lot of high school coaches that do a great job walking their athletes through the process and educating from a very early on stage. And I think there's some that completely leave them out to dry, and they're so lost. So even if US Rowing was to present on, here's, kind of covering all the bases of all the opportunities, and just kind of putting everything out there, and maybe, addressing, and again, like we have to look at rules and who can attend things and things like that. But I do think education for junior athletes is really helpful, because then it gives them the power to kind of go out and kind of find a place and be a little more proactive on their own.
Yeah, I love that. I think that would be a super thing for us to be able to do. And who knows, I mean, thinking outside of the box, maybe it even turns into non-junior rowers even show up. Paul and I have been thinking of some ideas around that. Just young athletes show up and get on an erg, and maybe they're not going to play basketball in college and they want to try rowing. Like, just sort of I think we have to start thinking outside the box a little bit. One thing I just learned we're doing today, I don't know if you know about this, Brett, but apparently we're having a collegiate career fair next year. Do you know about this? I didn't know about this. I
knew about the idea. I didn't know if it was coming to fruition.
Me neither. So apparently we're doing it. It sounds great. And it's all about connecting current college students with people in rowing for careers. So thinking about what are they going to do after college? So sort of leveraging all of the people in the rowing world. And that goes back to, I think that goes back to what I think it was Justin was talking about, this idea of, bigger tent, what more can we do to engage, more visibility, et cetera. So I'll keep you guys posted on that too.
Amanda, I had one other quick, it's a random idea, but it's like, I think rowing in the United States is the most competitive form of rowing literally in the world. Like, we get recruits from all, like, there has to be some way that US Rowing can, going along with kind of what Justin's saying, professionalize themselves a little bit more to really, there's no other global landscape that has the level of competitiveness that we do in the United States. Soccer has that in every other country. Track and field has that in every other country. Rowing doesn't exist the way it does at the collegiate level in the United States anywhere else in the world. Like, there's athletes from all over the world. From the Olympics, there'll be probably 25% of those rowers or 30% of those rowers will have gone to school in the United States. So, like, there has to be some way to grow that level of professionalism for US Rowing on a global scale. And I do think that's part of, the challenge for for US rowing, because we do have a different slice of the market than some of the other sports out there. People correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know statistics on other, you know, collegiate level sports, but I do think rowing is up there in terms of just building our identity, our global identity.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And it doesn't take longer than 5 weeks to recognize that we have work to do. And I'm trying to think of the right way to frame this. I think there's a ton of opportunity for us at US Rowing. I think, to be frank, we haven't had the resources, and we've been running on fumes for a really long time. That's what it looks like to me. And you know, really good people, and you mentioned Chris Chase, like, and we have Brett on the call, like really good people working very hard. But we need to put resources into professionalizing this organization and creating infrastructure, because we can't, I don't know, do we have any moms on the call, or dads? Like the adage around, like, you can't be helpful to anybody else if you're not taking care of yourself, right? You just can't do that. So I'm going to be screaming it from the rooftops to anyone who will listen. Not you guys, because I'm not looking to you guys to solve this, but that we need to put resources into US Rowing's own infrastructure so that we can be a good foundation for everybody else, including you all, and the juniors and the masters and the adaptive rowers. And if we don't do that, we can't be successful. But I think that we will be able to put those resources in, and I think then the path ahead is incredible. We're obviously not there at this moment. That's my feeling.
Well, hey, anything
this is Greg Hartsoff, and it's nice to meet you. And congratulations, by the way.
Sorry, I just heard aloud. Nice to meet you.
I wanted to tie into that because I think a lot of our issues are definitely solved with money. I mean, as a collegiate club coach, I can tell you that's the biggest issue with collegiate clubs, is making the ends meet. And in our programs, the barrier to entry is our finances, because we don't, and I believe the same phenomena happens at the junior level, and that we're really only able to recruit those who can afford to start paying dues. Right. And this is a different set of issues than collegiate varsity women's programs have right now, and even some men's, is that, you know, because if you contrast, even at our institution, our women's team has a budget of over $1 million, and we have one of $250,000 that we raise almost 100% of, right? So our barrier to entry to getting better athletes and to making the experience better is without a doubt money. And we're in a constant cycle of trying to figure out ways to bring those barriers down. And this is where I think US Rowing, you know, Justin talked about the legitimacy of the sport, and I think that is universal. Like every branch of US Rowing has that same challenge. And so and a lot of it's solved with money, you know, but some of it also is solved with some of the things that US Rowing is already doing. And I wanted to make you aware of some things tonight that I think US Rowing can continue to do. And I think one of those things is coaching education. The certification process, you may not be aware, but for collegiate clubs, and there's roughly 150 collegiate club teams that have several thousand athletes in them. And, you know, the directors of club sports, and I think the same thing as some of the varsity teams, if somebody is applying to be a coach at the university, and they're often hired by the kids or the kids funnel them in and then the university gives a thumbs up or thumbs down. They have to do a background check. Then they get checked off. The box they check off is coaching certification. And so we're in a constant cycle of bringing, kids who are just graduated from college and maybe they're going to grad school and they've been roped into being the coach there.
Right.
And they have to do a quick certification. So they've passed, their, CPR test, and they've been assured they can drive a launch and things like that, and handle all the safety aspects. So I think if US Rowing can make that, it's accessible. I mean, it's done at conventions and they have the clinics, but in this day and age right now, it's about immediacy. It's about being able to do it on a quick, short notice.
So is the ask, Greg, to make sure I'm hearing this right, is it, could we help sort of expedite or codify the hiring process for coaches, for clubs?
It definitely facilitates it.
Right.
US Rowing isn't directly involved in it, but the fact that you're certified coaches, and a lot of places require that their coaches have certification by their NGBs, that this is how US Rowing helps facilitate that. All right. Because the biggest area of concern is safety.
For sure.
We've heard about kids who've died in the sport. And I can tell you, when the kid at Northwestern died in 2017, it being a Big Ten school, it sent alarms off, for all of the Big Ten programs. And I knew it was coming. And eventually I got the calls from my club sport director, who'd been contacted by the rec sport director, who had been in conversations with, the ADs and the other directors about, are our kids being supervised correctly, so that we don't get other kids injured, and to be honest, they're just worried about getting their asses sued.
Right.
So, this is a very important thing that US Rowing does. And I think it just needs to continue to be streamlined and accessible, because it's just what's going to happen post-COVID, as I've been talking with other coaches and stuff. Like next year, we're going to have one class of kids on the team that's had basically a traditional experience. So we're going to have to completely rebuild this thing. We're going to have to completely rebuild team cultures, and then club teams that can go like the ebbs and flows of the sands of the Sahara. I mean, it's like, a good class of kids goes, and then it's another class coming in, and you got to reteach it all. And so we have a very big task ahead of us. And the coaching part of that is going to be absolutely critical, because there's been coaches who've just moved on with their lives. They don't have kids to coach right now. So there's going to be a whole new crop of coaches coming in here that will all need to be, certified and educated.
So Brett, you're going to be busy.
Very busy.
Greg, I just wanted to throw 2 cents in, just because I'm doing it this weekend. I don't know how familiar with like the updated, and obviously Brett can speak more to it, but I went through the modules it only took me, I don't know, Brett, you saw maybe a day or two, and then it's just a 2-day, it's all virtual. And by Sunday at 5, I'll be certified.
Yeah, so we have taken it virtual. COVID has forced a lot of positivity in terms of, I think, what you're talking about, Greg, and I hope we can do even more. And I think it's starting to gain momentum, because in the summer when we first rolled it out, we were kind of having trouble filling the classes. We'd have 15, 20 people. The one this weekend has 34 and has a wait list of 10 people on it. And then we're going to be offering, 2 in January and 2 in February. So, but we're really hoping to expand it. We took level 2 virtual, and we're working every week. We're working on the outline to make it even better for virtual. And then we're hoping to expand laterally with, okay, well, you want to take an extra safety certification course. We are running a certification course at convention next week for DE&I that we're pretty excited about. And we're planning on taking part of that as like an add-on, like a la carte course, like for people to be, and then, Amanda and I talked about it actually with the athletes, like how can we incentivize coaches and clubs, whether it's a requirement for US Rowing, or how do we incentivize people to take this training? And my number one concern is how do we make sure the content is worthy of people coming to take it is the principal thing.
Amanda, I have one last question for you. I was just wondering, like, what can we do to help US Rowing? Like, what?
Oh, that's so nice. Send whiskey.
A case? No, joking.
No,
Lots
yeah,
of liquor.
yeah.
I mean, like, what? There's, obviously a partnership is a partnership, right? And like, what? And maybe you're not ready to answer this yet, but what can this group of coaches do to help legitimize what's going on?
Yeah, that is so nice. And I'm sure there's an answer to that. I guess I'm not sure what it is yet. I guess the quick answer would be, though, is just like, can we keep the conversation going? Because I think it's really important for me to have a relationship with you all. Sorry, do you hear those every time they come in? And I think I'll have an answer to that soon. I think, like, I'm a big believer in, there isn't much we can't figure out together, right? And I leaned on that at Row New York. I started that with $5 and Jim Dietz driving down a couple fours to New York City, which he wasn't supposed to be doing.
No, I think I helped him load those.
Did you? Yeah. And he said, don't tell anybody. I'm like, okay, Jim. So I think there's a path forward. I need everyone's sort of energy and lift and feedback, and like, and then I think we'll get there. So I'd love to just keep the conversation going is my short answer. Anything else you guys think?
One other question. And
yeah.
It's, have you ever considered, or is there any consideration in having somebody that represents kind of college rowing on the US Rowing board?
Ooh, I love that.
I can speak to
anyone
that.
Here know how the US Rowing board works?
Yeah, I can speak to that. This is Gary. There was a time period from 13 to 17 where there were actually 4 of us on the board out of 14 who were all either college administrators or college coaches, including Jim Dietz, myself, and Aaron O'Connell, who at that point in time was the president of the board and the athletic director at Seattle Pacific. She's now the senior associate AD at the University of Washington. But there's nothing in the bylaws that would specify that some portion of the board should be college affiliated any more than there is that some number of the board members should be referees. The only codicils to the bylaws have to do with the Ted Stevens Act and making sure that we have the appropriate representation of our international athlete, elite athlete cadre. So right now it's the 2 codicils are that, and then the codicil for proportionate or somewhat proportionate representation of men and women.
And regional. Yeah.
And regional. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very, I think it's challenging. I mean, I think it's a little bit challenging because as Gary was saying, and thank you for that, we're sort of, tied into running things that way. One thing that I would like to do sooner rather than later is attempt to change the bylaws, which I think those of you who know, Patrick McNerney tried to do a couple of years ago and it didn't go through. But I would love to try again and see if we can sort of rethink that. I think college representation would be key, for sure. Like, how do we not have that, among other things? So, but it is what it is right now, Sheila. And I would say, one thing that I'm thinking about is, are there workarounds or groups I can start, that I don't need to, get anyone signing off on. I can just say I'm having like a CEO's circle of some sort. So are there other things? And yes, it wouldn't be as official, but I don't know that it matters.
I did like the number of college coaches that I represented on the DEI committee.
It is and Kevin I just saw you, Kevin. Yes. Yeah, we have, it's such a good group, and man, are they committed. They're constantly meeting and having debriefings from their meetings. I can't keep up with them. Slack, they're great. Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up, Sheila. Like, we absolutely should have representation there. But in the meantime, we can have these at any cadence you guys want to, maybe not like every night. But we can think about, maybe you can let us know. We'll follow up with this group, and maybe Jack, we should try to capture what cadence do you all want? What would make sense to just have an ongoing conversation, and you can tell me, you said you were going to do this and you haven't, or I have an idea. Like, we can keep the conversation going, because I can't do this. Like, I can't do this by myself. It's like me and my dog. I don't know where she is.
Kevin, you're unmuted. Did you want to say something? Oh,
we can't hear you, Kevin.
I know it's profound. I know it's amazing. You're a giant.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm not sure if I can be heard, but
we can hear you.
Can someone wave if you can hear me? Okay, thank you. What I was going to say was, I am on the DEI committee, and I've also done the self-nomination for the board. So, there is a small workaround to that.
Oh, yeah.
To say to our new CEO, thank you for just putting yourself out there. You must be getting your ear talked off right now.
Oh, you mean right now? No, you guys have been pretty good. It's almost like I actually had the pleasure of rowing with some of these people at the head of the Charles last year, and it was really intimidating getting in a boat with 7 other women. I think all of them were college coaches except for me. And I just sort of sat there in 6C, like, I don't think I should say anything. And everyone was very well behaved. I was so impressed that no one, don't you think, Maddie? Everyone was very good.
Yeah. We were on our best behavior.
Yeah. Yeah,
we got into some tussles on the race course, but it was all very civil.
No, Kevin, everyone's been very well behaved. I don't expect such good behavior after the honeymoon's over. So you can bring it on when we meet again. I can take it. Also, it's time for dinner. So as you guys can all appreciate, but let's keep the conversation going. I really mean that. And I appreciate your time tonight and hearing from all of you. And the work that you do is so important. I know you're not in it for the money. And it's so key that we have you in all these young people's lives. So thank you so much.